Your alternative talk radio contact. The Planet. KGRAradio.com.
With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Welcome to another episode of Into the Fray, hovering over you like a black triangle in a deserted field. Visit the mothership at intothefrayradio.com. There you can find all the episodes, the blog posts, ITF gear, and sign up for the free guest newsletter. The weekly show is, of course, always free and available in all podcatchers, but if you'd like to support the show, and why wouldn't you, go to the website and click Become an Insider, which in turn gets you extra content each and every month. And by the way, if you would be so kind as to leave a rating and review in your listening platform of choice, Cosmic Karma shall be yours. Be part of the discussion by joining the interactive ITF Facebook group. Follow on Twitter at ITF_radio and Instagram. If you have an experience that you'd like to share, email Shannon at intothefrayradio.com. Thanks so much for listening. Now, if you would be so kind, buckle up your safety belts. Put that tray table in the upright position. Liftoff is upon us.
On this edition of Into the Fray, I have Robbie Thomas. He is a psychic medium and spiritual counselor who helps internationally families and police fight against crime while bringing solace to those who need it. Over the many years, he has been assisting in many murder cases and missing persons cases. Robbie has been able to give great details to those devastating crimes or happenings which have led to finding lost people and arrests being made in murder cases. He works very closely with families in conjunction with law enforcement. He's published 8 books of his own and co-contributed to 4 other books. He's been in movies such as Dead Whisper and The Sally House, and TV shows like Kevin Smith Show and True Ghost Stories Show. Find him at robbiethomas.net. Welcome to the show. I've been really looking forward to talking to you after reading your book. And so how would you describe yourself, Robbie? Are you psychic? Are you a psychic medium at all? I know that people often get those things confused, and I was wondering how you describe yourself.
Yeah, great question. And, just to start it off with, I've done this for 28 years. I don't know how one would categorize it or say, put a title. Psychic profiler came way of a detective. The real deal came way of another detective. Looking back at psychic, medium, clairvoyant, whatever all these titles people put on, I used to say on shows I did a long time ago was, God gave me what I have and everybody what they have, intuition, and we're all love spirit. I hate the terms. I really do, because when I work with them, and I'll be honest right here, straight up with everybody, when you say you're psychic, they think carnival. Mm-hmm. When you say you're this type of person, they think, oh, here we go again, where it's a carnival act. And so I don't like the terms myself professionally. And I'm not knocking anybody who does use them. I use it as a benchmark so people understand what it is I do so they can identify with it. Other than that, I just hear, see, feel, whatever happens at the moment during a case or on scene with the family. And I've really never delved into, am I a psychic or am I a medium? So I just put the titles out there. People identify, so be it.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge stigma attached to any of that, right? Even though I know that some of you guys that are, in fact, the real deal, which is a perfect, subtitle for your book, that you guys, you do the work. And it has come through that you have found people that have committed these crimes when traditional law enforcement cannot.
True. When we look at the aspect of your question or your point you just made, there are a handful, and I'll say a handful because I've worked from every angle of the United States. I'm Canuck. So for them to call me to come there, that tells you just how many there are in the United States. And I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying for them to call me to go over there, there's a reason. And as I look down this road that everybody stipulates and calls, that profiler or whatever you have, be it, that works with law enforcement, there are the ones out there that are do better than I am, that do work with law enforcement. I'm just very fortunate that I'm able to lend myself to them in order, as you read in the book, all those cases and come to fruition, all those cases.
Do you see the stigma lifting at all? Do you think it'll become more of a norm and okay to have it more out in the open that law enforcement agencies are using psychics to help solve these cases? And Robbie, before you answer that question, here's a quick word from our sponsor. Hiring. Every business needs great people and a better way to find them. Something better than posting your job online and just praying for the right people to see it. ZipRecruiter knew there was a smarter way, so they built a platform that finds the right job candidates for you. ZipRecruiter learns what you're looking for, identifies people with the right experience, and invites them to apply to your job. In fact, 80% of employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through this site in just one day. The right candidates are out there, and ZipRecruiter is how you find them. Right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/fray. That's ZipRecruiter.com/fray. ZipRecruiter.com/fray. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
Well, when you read the demographic of the book itself and you see inside there the different cases that I brought forward, I've shown literally where I did a 2010 tour and I started out in my hometown in front of my home crowd, packed theater, and I brought the family on stage, who was estranged from other family in the audience. They did not know either or if this was going to happen and they were going to be there. But prior to that, the stigma, as you mentioned, psychic tells family for 14 years that her husband was dead and buried behind a jail in Mexico. Don't bother looking for him. Now, I found him alive and in Canada with law enforcement. And that's in the book. So when we look at that stigmata of why people give wrong direction, why I think what it is everybody who thinks they have this ability, everybody has intuition. But as soon as they turn and say, well, I'm a psychic and I can solve a case, and they bungle a case like this, it makes law enforcement, as you say in the latter part of your statement or question, look bad in the direction of somebody who actually does go out and help and tear down a case and analyze it and give it back to them. And then they say, yeah, okay, now we understand. And we're the foothold and we can go forward and solve it. It becomes redundant in many cases because there's a lot more cases I could have put in this book, but I'm saving them all for book 2. That video I sent you where you see the lead head investigator for the state police of Indiana. And he says, "I'd like to thank all law enforcement." And he was going to say my name. I know he was, but he said, and in Canada. Well, he's mentioning me.
Yeah.
And that's pertinent to the case. That's very poignant to what he's trying to say. They had, and I got sent to me a list, I kid you not, 30 people. That's a short list of so-called psychics who gave them information. Now, I've done law enforcement shows where they've had detectives on as the hosts, where you are, and they come straight out and say, we really despise when somebody sends in information and we have to follow that to a T because it's a lead. And when it dries up and there's nothing, and they've called themselves a psychic, they've wasted a week or two, even longer, of our time, taxpayers' money, and hope for the family, and it goes nowhere. How do you remedy this? I don't know. I just say to everybody out there who's tuning into your show, listening to this, if you have a loved one who has passed on or a missing loved one, check out the dossier of someone they call themselves psychic. If they have law enforcement who back them up, they should have their names in a dossier. If they have cases, they should have them listed in there. So you could do your research and find out that, talk to the family members, talk to the detectives. And then that way there, you're not putting your whole life and heart and soul into one individual who's going to do you harm more than good.
Well, and what's really terrifying is if there is someone who's just missing and they're still looking for them, and then you're talking about wasting an entire week or more, that's monumental, to say the least.
It is. I mean, if your loved one went missing and you called Jane Doe down the street and she's led you on and it's gone on for a long time, and then you get a call and say, I'll use that as an example, NBC called me up and said, we want you to fly you down to Grand Junction to find Paige Bergfeld. That's one of the cases in the book. And they dubbed the show called Mother by Day, Hooker by Night. She was a call girl, but she was a pristine mother during the day. Now, this went on for a year, and it was totally wrong. And then, as you read in the book, Sergeant Cliff Christ calls me up, and we get the details. I mentioned the man's name, where he worked, and of course, Lester Jones is now behind bars for life for murdering Paige Bergfeld. There's a distinguishing mark and roadmap, I always call it, where if you find somebody, and that's why I always say to people out there, again, I'll reiterate this, check their background out, make sure they have a dossier, make sure they have all the stuff that they say they're doing. And if they don't, get out of there. Don't bother with them. Your blue line is your number one go-to, the police. They know who's real out there. And that's why they come. Once you mention somebody's name, they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, I'll go to him. We'll go to a live case that I'm working on today. There's several of them. Wichita, Kansas. And in Wichita, Kansas, boys missing. So the big search team, part of it from Echo Search, mentions my name to the detective. And he says, oh, hell yeah, we know who he is. Anything he wants, he's got it. So, I mean, when it comes down to that point where they know who you are, that's what you call a stabilized agreement between, finding somebody for yourself and knowing that you're going to be okay. Otherwise, we're in this dilemma of so many people out there calling themselves psychic, and it's costing a lot of heartache out there.
When you mentioned the blue line, and we'll take it back here for a minute before we get into the couple of cases that I wanted to discuss with you, but that is what you wanted to do, is become a police officer. And now you are still in that field doing that work, but it's on another side of it because you felt like this was your calling. But I love the part, and maybe you want to touch on it a little bit, that you were kicking ass and taking names and got right in there, but you weren't old enough yet to be commissioned as an officer. I love that part of the book.
Yeah, I got the boot. Yeah, I was just gung-ho at wanting to be a police officer, and I went and did the testing right through the psychological, right through all the physical, beat out many candidates. I mean, there was hundreds of guys going for this position. There was only taking 3 auxiliaries. So I made it through to the top 3 and welcomed into the chief's office, sat there waiting for him to come in. You know, I'm a peacock. I mean, I'm just peachy. This is great. I'm going to be a police officer. I'm looking at the clock. The clock's ticking, and I'm waiting, and then all of a sudden you hear this voice. A big burly man comes in, and he looks at the other 2, congratulates them, sitting down, staring at me. And he goes, "Son, how old are you?" And I told him. And the other 2 giggled, and he laughed, and then he explained to me, "You have to be 20 to be an auxiliary." So there goes my police career. I was hired and fired in the same day, but I didn't give up. You know, that was, that's something I'll live with forever. And that's a great story for everybody. Just don't give up. And I went on and I got hired on afterwards. But then again, I take the flip side of that. I quit. And you just can't quit when you become hired on. They want to know why. So they sent a film crew down. And there was a captain, a sergeant, and the film crew. They're in my house. They're asking questions about, you know, my well-being and everything. Then they hit the question, why did you quit? And I explained to them, well, I'm doing CPR on this man I found dead. And he talked to me. He said, "Let me go." And they couldn't believe it. They just, you know, they looked astonished. They didn't know what to think. And that's the very first movie I'm in. It's about EMTs, firefighters, and police officers who quit under duress. But I was not stressed out. It was just the fact that I knew somewhere along the lines, law enforcement was in my blood, but I'm going to do it a little bit different and a broader scale. And sure enough, here we are.
And that's in the book what you titled The First Incident, and that was when you were 17. If you don't mind, you brushed on it a little bit, but the CPR on the guy in the bathroom, if you wouldn't mind telling that story.
Yeah. I get home from police testing. This is where I got hired on in a town outside of Toronto, Canada. And I'm, again, happy, and I'm sitting in my kitchen with my family, and I hear, accident. So I open my sliding patio doors, and I run out my backyard. I hop the fence, and there's townhouses behind my home. And I see this lady running around in a robe, and she's pointing south in the parking lot. So I'm running. And the road curves out to the street, and I can still hear her behind me. It's the accident. So I look out in the road. There's no cars. There's no accident. So I'm thinking to myself, she's screaming accident. But then there's this gentleman to my left, and he says, "No, over here." And he waves me over. So now I'm walking into the townhome. There's a lady to my left running around a table screaming. There's a gentleman to my right holding a doorknob. And he goes, "Come here." So I walk over to him. He opens the door, grabs my shoulder, but I'm still looking on the floor for blood. Because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, accident. And he shoves me in, shuts the door. And I look up, and there's a gentleman sitting there looking straight at me. And his purple lips, he had a gaunt look to him. His eyes were peering, and it's just like nobody there. So I go right away, and the first thing you do, because you're trained, is vitals, and you're checking. I don't feel a pulse, so I start to go get ready to do CPR and pull this guy down. And sure enough, he says, "Let me go." I stopped for a brief moment, and I looked around. I didn't hear that, but it didn't dawn on me. Because as a child growing up, I could hear and see. But at that moment, I wasn't that guy. I was the guy going to rescue this man. So I go to check again vitals, about to do CPR, and I hear really loud, "Let me go." So I did know. I did hear him. I stopped. I backed out. And after the autopsy, it turned out he had a major coronary and a tear in his heart wall. I wouldn't have been able to revive him anyways. The uncanny part of this was my sister's best friend's father. And it was a touching moment. I mean, I'm a sentimental guy. I went to the funeral, and I knew the family. I remember they're right up in the paper saying, "Thank you for trying, Robbie," and blah, blah, blah. But it was that moment when I knew, you know, there's something bigger out there. There's something more broader, and that brought me to where we are today.
So you did have experiences growing up where you would get feelings or see things or hear things that you knew other people couldn't?
Yeah, you know, in my adolescent years, or my first book was 2003. And I write in the book about my peer section. If they ever found out what I feel, what I see, how I am, or how I react, or whatever I do in my life, they would crush me. And so I kept everything a secret. I really wrote it all in there. In my very first television 1 hour special was in 2003 as well, and brought out in 2004. And I talk about this, and I explained about how, as an adolescent growing up, even, other children who see, feel, don't feel, that you're different. It's not. It's perfect. It's a way of life. This is how you are. My father bought a home. I was going to go to a St. Patrick's High School, Catholic school. We moved in there and remodeled the home that summer prior to grade 9. And I remember tearing the walls out, doing it all up with my father. And then I went to bed one night. It was August. The moon was coming through. It was a hot summer night. And then drapes were open or curtains were open. I shut the light off. I climbed into bed. And I just turned, and there he was. He was staring right at me. And he started coming towards me. And in full apparition. And dark, kind of, people call them shadow people. And he wanted to get to me. He knew. Being a catalyst, they know. They know who to go to. So I scream. Mother comes in, turns the light on. Obviously, he's gone. So over the course of the rest of the summer, I got to know him. And he explained to me that the 3 gentlemen across the road, who he was very good friends with, were about to pass on. Mr. Leach used to be a very stout man. And I remember sitting on the porch when my father, because Mr. Leach used to come over and chew the rag with my dad all the time. And he walked across the road, and he was holding his pants. He's so thin and frail, and I used to just, stare at him. How did he go from being this big man to being nothing? And then sure enough, he passed away. He had cancer. Then Mr. Harding died of a heart attack next to Mr. Leach, and Mr. Waters died in a hunting accident. So you got 3 gentlemen, and it all happened so sudden, and it was exactly what the gentleman was telling me. So when you look at the younger years and how to grow up and how to distinguish and decipher information, I always tell people, if your son or daughter are having these type of episodes, if you will, bring out a journal. Write down their words, not your words. Don't elaborate. Give it everything that they have. And as they grow older, and every time you write something for them, be open with them, because we are spirit. Spirit comes around a lot to a lot of people. Your child will see that as they get older into our age, and they'll look back and go, thank you, Mom and Dad. Now I know the direction I'm going. I know that I'm not crazy, and I see all that has been going on. It gives them that aptitude of looking back and saying that exact thing. In the early 90s, they used to have a forums, before there was Yahoo and Twitter and all these other social medias. It was called Robbie Thomas Forums. In 1995-ish, this lady that you read in the book, she used to belong to my forum, followed me since then. She called me up in mid-2000s and said, I thought I'd never have to use you, but my daughter got taken into the sex slave trade. So she said the detective was, at his wit's end, didn't know what to do, nowhere to run, no runs to leads to run, anything. So she suggested me, and he said, yes, call him. So he did, and you read her statement. She puts it in the book. She puts, and he brought my daughter home, and in capital letters, alive. Now, she's been following me since mid-1990s. There's a lot of people on social media that follow me since then, from Australia, all around, England, here. It's the teaching, and I love to teach. I love to explain to people, as we're doing on your show, these are the right things to do for your children. Write these things down, like you say, or like I say, in a journal, so they can look back at it. And then coming up to Kim and her daughter even, and God forbid that happens to anybody. I don't want that ever to happen to anybody at all. But, she can look back and say, I can rely on him, and he helped me. And, this is real. I just look back at everything going in that so full circle of everything that has transpired over the years. And I just think it's a wonderful thing, because it's just not me. It's you. And it's everybody who's listening in. And those who don't believe, that's okay, because you're keeping your faith in check by still looking for it every day. It's part of your faith.
Now, do you kind of wish that you would have executed keeping a journal? Do you feel like there's incidents in your younger years that you might have forgotten?
You know, that's funny. Looking back at that, and I wish, you're right. Listening to the stories from my mother before she passed on, and my family members as well. I used to talk about Carmichael. That was my guardian, my angel. And as I grew up, Carmichael would grow up. And, I just referred to him all the time. And, when people say, my child has a visionary friend or imaginary friend, what should I do? Like I say again, journal it, because I wish it happened to me, because there were so many times I had these special occasions with Carmichael, and it just led me to where I am, coming up here, growing up. At one point in my life, I did want to become a priest. I did. Father Pedelt had this overbearing beautifulness of himself, how he used to preach and talk to the kids. And I said, I wanted to be like him. Grade 2, so I guess you're about 7, 8 years of age. Then I discovered girls at 16, so that went out the window. And then the police thing came. But yeah, I wish that back in the day that there was some type of journal brought up for me that I can remember all those stories. But there's some that stay with me in my memory, and I'm thankful for that.
And those are probably the most important ones anyhow, right? The ones that stuck with you.
True.
Well, what about other family members? Do they have the same abilities that you do?
I remember as a child when my mom and dad would go over every Sunday for supper to my grandma and my grandpa's house, that they would play cards. It would be like, it's a French version called cats, but it's a euchre, and they would play that. And as a child, I'd sit on the floor or on the couch, and I used to play with these deck of cards. They're a little bit bigger than normal cards, and I put the pictures, like the cups to the cup, or the man holding a cup to that. And what they were tarot cards. They were my grandmother's set. And then I just remembered, looking back at that, so it stemmed from her side, obviously, because that's what I can remember of my grandmother and my great aunt.
Well, let's jump to 1990, and let's talk about Jesse and that very dark cloud that you saw right out of the gate.
Yeah. This is 1990, time I'm going through to be a police officer, not be a police officer. I'm in the parking lot speaking with a good friend of mine, Greg. Greg managed this complex, this building. And as I look over Greg's shoulder, I see this individual walking towards the main entrance to enter the building. And around him was this black shroud. So now my focus is completely on Jesse. And Greg notices that. My eyes aren't talking with him anymore. I'm looking over the shoulder. So he turns around, looks over at Jesse and says, "That's Jesse. You want to go meet him?" And I said, "Sure." Because I was just drawn to, like, why has this guy got this huge, and I know black means bad, but why is it around this guy walking in there and out of the blue? So we ended up somehow into Jesse's apartment. So now Greg is sitting on one couch adjacent from where I'm sitting next to Jesse. And my line of questioning, I'm a very straightforward individual. And back then I was even more so. Maybe I've toned down a little bit as I get older. But I said, what do you do for a living? Are you in trouble with the law? And that type of questioning triggered Jesse. I'm trying to figure out this kid. He was like a miniature sawed-off Eddie Van Halen, 5 foot nothing, identical. And so he says to me, "Stand up." So I stand up. He goes, "Are you effing hot?" And I didn't clue in. And then all of a sudden he's lifting my shirt and he's checking around my waist. And then I knew he was looking for a wire. That's what he meant by if I was hot. And so he pushes me down. He goes, "You want to know?" And I'm still not cluing in what he's talking about. He goes, "We were ripping off a car stereo across the way from the gas station. Thomas wanted to go and rip off the gas station. So we left the car stereo. We walked over to the gas station. Now, you got a picture. It's just a little 6x3 cubicle little gas station, plexiglass. And there's a 14-year-old little boy inside there. His family moved from Quebec to Ontario and started a new life. And he was going to the school that I would later on attended, was St. Patrick's High School. So this 14-year-old boy was making a little extra cash at night doing this gas station job. And Thomas pulls out a gun and started shooting him. And if you could put your hand sideways with your thumb sticking out, this is how he described it. And as you jerk your hand towards you, he's going like that, making a gun motion. He's saying, and we popped him like this. And he was hopping like a rabbit. But when he said it like that, he had a big grin on his face.
Oh, God.
And yeah, it's like, I'm looking at evil here. And so then he says, stand up again. He asked me to leave, but it was we got a little bit boisterous. And then as he's telling me to leave, Greg by now is already at the door going into the hallway. And he grabs me, pushes me towards the door, grabs my shoulder, pulls it back and says, if I tell anybody, he's going to kill me. And he let me go. So as I went out and to the hallway and down to Greg's apartment, we started talking there. And I remember Greg's wife going at him, why did you do that? And Greg called back. I said, I got to leave. I'm going to talk to the detectives. So I left and I started talking to the detectives. They wanted me to go back and wear wire and befriend him. And I said, why? And he said, we're in court with him right now over this murder. And we got nothing. And, I'm sitting there going, I can't do that because he's going to kill me. He told me he would. And that was my first case. So when I explain to people who think they have ability and they're going to interject themselves into hunting down murderers, take this example and let it sink in, because he could have killed me. And I don't tell people, this is the right thing to do, because it's not. Do it the right way if you're going to do anything at all. But that I learned from that lesson, and everything since then I've been doing professionally.
Yeah, I remember your reaction would be mine when they're like, hey, can you just go be buddies with Jesse and wear this wire? And you're like, are you effing kidding me? Like, really? He already checked me for a wire, and he's highly disturbed. I mean, to be grinning while you're describing how you murdered someone. That's disgusting. Yeah.
He was black, and that's what, And I remember part in between the talking, his girlfriend was pregnant, and she was pacing back and forth and telling him a few things. He stood up and he smacked her. Mm-hmm. This guy was just not right.
So what happened with Jesse in that case, or is that still kind of not finished up, or do we know what's going on there?
No. Yeah, they got off on like he said too on the way out, he goes, we have an alibi. And we got people covering us. So they got off on an alibi. That's the bad thing about this town where I live. There's a lot of cases that are unsolved and people get off on them. Well, they got off, and I hate to say this part, but then his partner, Thomas Cook, re-murdered his own girlfriend. What he did was he took saran wrap and he saran wrapped her head and he held her arms and she couldn't breathe. So he watched her take her last breath, and then he turned himself in. He's in jail for life for that now.
Oh, my God. He did that and then calmly turned himself in.
Yes, he did.
Oh. Yeah, there's true monsters out there just walking amongst us. We have no idea who they are. Wow. Holy smokes, I wasn't expecting that one, man. So the process for you, I mean, when you get handed a case, what's your workflow with that? I don't know if you're okay with sharing that, or if each time it's different, or what does that look like for you? What's your process? It varies. I mean, I've worked several cases with some detectives. There's a couple of cases in the book where I've worked with one detective. And, I like to point this out on your show too, is if people get the book and read it, you'll see that all the factual statements from the law enforcement, they tell you, yes, he did. And they break it all down in how I solved the case and worked with them on these cases. Now, the urgency, I'm at my home, and Officer DeLay,
He's in Florida, and he said, he calls me up, I need you. I said, okay. He goes, we have a missing endangered elderly lady. Now, very endangered. We need your help. So the bolo went out at 9:30 in the morning. He called me at 9:32. I found her alive in Tampa from where he was. And she took the bus, like I said, and all the description and everything. There's more detail. It's all in the book. But it happened that quick. He sends me a photograph. I said, send me the case file. Sends me the file. I don't look at it. I don't have time. I'll look at the photograph. And I'm cluing in on Colleen. And I'm just trying to figure out, what's going on in her life, what kind of vibe I can pick up. And so I'm picking up all this stuff, and I'm telling him. As I'm telling him and texting him and calling him back and forth within this whole hour, he's radioing out to the other Blue Liners, and they're running to different areas he's talking about, and they're checking, she's not there, until the final information I say, she took a bus and she's in the Bay Area. So then, by then, they had a helicopter in the sky, hundreds of cops out everywhere, and they find her alive in the Bay Area. That's how fast that worked. There's times where they send me a photograph, and I kid you not, it could take literally a week, one time maybe an hour, where I'm looking at a little boy on screen, and you've seen it in the book where I draw the monster's face from his eyes, and then I get really upset, really like I'm distraught because of the fact that I'm in there, and then all of a sudden there's a void and I'm out of there because he's being killed. So I've had the part where I'm dealing with angels and guides giving me information. All of a sudden now I'm getting hardcore information where I get the murderer's name and where he is. And sure enough, they arrest that guy and he's in jail. It's all different. And then there's times where they call me, we need you on scene. And I go on the death scene, and I pick up like I'm right there, like what's going on. I could describe how they killed him, who was all there. And when I get the opportunity to question the suspects, even, well, it's a lot of people who, they think you get the chance. I do. I get the opportunity because I get into their mindset. And like Andy, Detective DeLay said to me on the double homicide, he goes, you want to ask him questions, go ahead. I know he put me on the spot. I wasn't ready for that, but I quickly just clued in, and I started asking this jerk, these questions. And sure enough, I said to him, you're like shit, you roll downhill, right? And shit just goes, it went on and on. It's all in the book.
Yeah.
And this kid's looking at me like, you're talking to me like that. And he kept calling me Mr. FBI man. And sure enough, he confessed. I got his confession. And, but I didn't need it because the murderer, the number one murderer, gave a deathbed confession. So that was later on. This is hot right now too. And it'll be announced on your show. It'll be breaking in Kentucky coming up this Friday in the newspaper. Not only did I get the deathbed confession out of Ronnie, and I talked to Ronnie on the phone, and I said to him, these two are going to play in your brain, and they're going to psychologically get to you all the time. Well, after we disbanded, and I came back home in Delay, went back to Florida, Ronnie gave a deathbed confession and killed himself, but he also told another witness the exact same story. Wow. So we have this. Now there's a cover-up in the old guard. The old guard's not there no more. There was a good cop. Okay, there's always good cops, and there's always bad cops, good teachers, bad teachers, lawyers, any profession. Well, he sent all the interrogation videos. I have them all. I have so does the family. And this is a first for anybody. You're hearing it on her show, Shannon's show. And I looked at them, and I'm thinking, you got the one guy telling you it was the guy who did it, where the fire started, behind the house, how they did it. Then you have the other guy I got the confession for, suspect number 3, the weakest link, Bobby. You have him talking to the detective, and you can see it was like a play, almost like they were, coordinated this. And the questions are coming back and forth, but they stepped on a lot of things that made them look incriminating. So all these videos, it made the detective and the sheriff's office look bad. So now the newspaper got a hold of this, and it's going to go huge. I know probably from there it'll spread all through the United States. Corruptus, here we are at its finest.
And what's
because he come out to me.
I'm sorry, Robbie, I stepped on you. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, what's a quick synopsis and a snapshot of the crime that happened there?
Yeah. Okay, 2 gentlemen, father and son, were burned alive in a trailer fire, and then his arms were cut off. A lot of damage, very horrific. Now you have the tape. I got the confession from Bobby. You have the detective on camera going, I listened to this tape. He says, you confessed on this. And he said, I listened to the tape. You confessed on this. He said those very words. Now he comes out after and he hands the tape to us. He goes, there's nothing on it. He erased the tape. So we have him, which he doesn't realize, the good cop set all these interrogations with us.
Oh my God.
So it's like, yeah, this is going to be in the news on Friday in Kentucky. I can't wait to see the story and what's going to happen. Hopefully it opens it up a little bit more and the family gets a little bit more closure.
God, that's awful. You've asked for the snapshot of the actual crime, and then, you have certain things you might be expecting, but wow, that's horrific. In your book there, you mentioned, and I messaged you, and I said that this definitely struck me because I think a lot of us say things and we don't really think about it. But the woman that said, oh, what a wonderful gift you have. I wish I had that. And you're kind of going, do you realize that the shit that I see and the things that go through my head, this is not all fortune and fame and glamour and wonderful, happy little stories running through your mind. I mean, to see someone's killer in their mind before they're dying and maybe even feel that terror, I can't even imagine that.
Yeah, it's not even that. That's part of the equation. What it is that you live through death threats. You look over your shoulder 24/7. People often ask me, don't you fear for your life? And I say, no, because I went through to be a cop twice. There's a reason why. I'm not scared. I mean, I've had guns pointed at me on scene. I've had death threats. I had them come to our hotel when America's Most Wanted was filming us. I mean, I'm not fearful of this. I'm doing this for a reason. And these, I'm going to say it, these flighty people who have all these, I'm psychic and I'm doing a reading on social media and watch me, that's fine. But don't say, oh, I wish I had your job. I wish I could do it. No, you don't, because they'll come and get your family. They'll come after you. I mean, there's things people don't realize. It's not all glam and fortune and it's not that whatsoever. I think the stigmata is the TV. I think what gives it or brands this into people's brains are these fake shows you see on TV where a psychic goes and goes, oh, yeah, I see this fire, I see this red light. It's not like that at all. It's totally different when you're on scene.
Now, Robbie, what about, considering how well you can do this, have you been approached ever by any government agency to work for them?
Yeah, a couple times. India, just recently. There's 10 sailors missing. And this is a whack story. I kind of sat back, and when I get the feeling like, no, step back, I ask a lot of questions. So I'm asking a lot of questions to these people over in India. The boat was headed from India to North Korea. Somehow Japan got involved. Now, the only thing you can think of is why there's a big hole in the side of the boat. They got sunk, obviously, in the Philippine Sea. They recovered 23 sailors, 10 are missing. Families are all upset. I get it. We want our loved ones. I got the families writing me. We want you to help us. Yeah. I said, get the government, so the government gets involved. But they're stymied at the fact that I continue asking questions, what's going on. So they kind of shunned me and backed off. But they came on strong in the beginning. Yeah, kind of weird. And that's a big, that's too big for Robbie to handle.
Yeah, well, that says a lot, though, doesn't it? I mean, they searched you out, and then you're giving them what they claim they wanted, and now they're like, never mind, we're going to move on from here. You're going, oh, okay, I see what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't need the world after me. It's bad enough.
No, especially mentioning, things like North Korea and all that. I mean, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In one of my books called Signs from Heaven, the Canadian government, Roger Galloway, Member of Parliament, Honorable Roger Galloway, endorsed me in that book. And I had the opportunity. There was a lady's life that hung in the balance. She was on Terceira Island. And at the time, the United States were flying sorties from Terceira to the Gulf War in 1991, I think it was. And so here's big old brave Rob calling up the White House, calling up the senators, and all of a sudden the phone wouldn't stop. And I got the White House calling, and I got Senator David Bonnier calling, Spence Abraham from Michigan calling. I got them all on the phone. The only one who really helped out was David Bonnier, and he said he knew Roger Galloway. So I got a hold of Roger, who is a member of Parliament here in Canada, and he cut through the red tape, got tickets. I had a doctor who was going to donate all his time. I had somebody from the UN was going to donate a Hercules aircraft that could land on a short runway to take her out of there. Wow. I was speaking with the Vatican as well. The Israeli government called me and told me, don't speak of this no more. Because at the time, the Gulf War, well, Israel was involved as well. And, here's just this guy, me, going through his motions with all this. And so getting involved with the government. But the bittersweet of that is it brought, the mustard seed to move a mountain?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I had all of them involved. And they're all calling on and off all through every day for weeks until we remedied this and people started pulling together. But it has a bittersweet end. And I look and tell people this. Noelia is a beautiful woman who passed away. Because of her spirit who willed me to go and do this, it brought together all these different nations and people saying, yeah, we could do this, people. And that's what matters. So, yeah, I got an opportunity to work with different in that aspect as well.
Do you think you'd be surprised by anything at this point, that any email or phone call you might get to work a case, no matter where it might be or who it might be with? Do you think you'd ever be surprised?
Oh, I've had calls from Loretta Lynn, the country queen, Loretta Lynn. I couldn't believe that when she called. But I mean, it doesn't surprise me anymore. I've met a lot of beautiful people. I think people are just people, no matter what your stature, what you think you are in this world. We're just same. We go, in the end, we're all going to go the same place, 6 feet under. So, I mean,
yes.
I just do the most I can in this life. And if somebody called, and if you were somebody from Japan, oh, heck, I had somebody from Ireland one time. It was her father was a delegate to Canada, and he laid in state, and they wanted to bring me over there. But this is many years ago. Now you jogged my memory, and I was just, too young, and I thought, no, I can't do this. But I won't. I wouldn't put it past anybody calling me.
Yeah. I'm just wondering about that because, you're mentioning all these different countries and these agencies and all these folks you've talked to. I'm like, holy cow, I bet you're just like, I wonder what today's going to bring, Gosh.
I do sometimes. I wake up and I go, oh no, here we go. The phone hasn't rung yet.
Yeah, just give it a minute, right?
Yeah.
So before we touch on the Delphi murders, which I appreciate you bringing that up to me because we're going to finish up with that. Before we get to that, though, I did choose one more from The Real Deal, and that is Dan and his wife it's entitled Chained in the Basement. And the reason I chose this is because I'm fascinated with the brainwashing and the mind control that a lot of times your neighbor might be doing that right next door right now to somebody and you would have no clue.
True. Look what happened in Ohio.
Oh my God.
Those 3 girls.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. God bless them. Absolutely. I mean, I went down to do a charity benefit. It was for Make-A-Wish. This ghost hunting group was putting on this event, asked Rescue Medium's TV show to show up, which they did, Jackie Dennison and Michael Lamport, the producer, who became later on my producer. And myself to be the keynote speakers. So I said, okay, if it's for Make-A-Wish, anything for charity. So I did. I get down there. It felt kind of uneasy around her and her husband, but there was other people who actually still follow me, like you do on Facebook here. They were there, and we've often talked about this case as well. I just couldn't pinpoint it again. It's like one of that black shroud, but I went through the whole thing, did my thing for the charity and what have you. I come home and I get a phone call, and then I had to drive all the way back because of what was going on with a girl who was chained in the basement. Now, this is really going to freak you out. I was doing another case, and these two families are miles and cities apart. So this one girl was found hung in a park, but this young girl couldn't have hung herself in the swing up that high by herself. I'd say maybe 200 feet from the police station. Mm-hmm. This is what happened. So I'm helping this one lady out. Then all of a sudden I'm doing this event at the same time. Then I get called down to go talk to this guy about a chain in the basement. Well, it was so uncanny how the mom of this girl who was hung in the park was friends with the daughter who was missing, chained in the basement. So I'm thinking, this is just like, how do I get tied into this stuff? And just really weird how it all came together. So he's explained to me what's going on. She's AWOL from the American Army. She's over here, and she's using her to pay her rent. So I told him right there, I really, literally wanted to, if it was just that one fragment of a second more, I think I would have snapped his neck when he was telling me, and I leaned over that table. It was just, you just had to push me. And that's what I would have done. So close to doing it. But I made him go back, and he himself left his wife, and they got the girl released. Well, the other woman did time back in the United States for being AWOL. That's the most I found out about just before writing the book, what took place with her, what went on in her life. But it was just, you see these people, they're everyday, ordinary individuals, and they're out there, but yet they're frickin' monsters. And they chain a young girl. Now, Paula said to me, I can write the story and put it in the book, but not put their last name because they still have their own family who are dealing with criminal element themselves, and they want to go down this path. And, her daughter's totally innocent of everything else. So I said, I agreed. So she gave me the opportunity to write about it, and I did. And it's a story for everybody out there, and I want people to pay attention. There's another chapter in the book I read about social media and being in with your children. Is it okay to be friends with your? Yes, absolutely. You hear people say, don't be a friend, be a parent. No, you have to be both, because your children will open up to you. Be more than just that parent. Be someone who you can be trustworthy, and your child can be more of that with you. You have to start to do it these days that we live in. You have to. It's a sad story all the way around. And like you said, you just never know your neighbor.
Yeah, because they were telling this young lady that her family doesn't want her, that she belonged there with them. And it sounds like she wasn't, I don't know exactly, but it sounds like she wasn't fighting it that much, like she was totally brainwashed. How long was she down there?
Long. I don't remember how long, or weeks or months, but she was down there a long time.
Oh, God.
And for that to happen, and then, brainwash is not the word for it. Her will was gone. And then to look at this and the family not wanting to press charges against them is because of the criminal element that they were involved in.
Wow.
It's a sad situation all the way around. If it was me, I would have had her charged, deal with, it's like this. Here's a good example. The lady who said to me, he brought my daughter home alive, when I told her, you have to follow what I say, she goes, I can't. My family's conservative. They'll disown me. And then she hung up the phone. And then she called back. And this went on for all day, back and forth, bitching and arguing with me. And then, on a good scale. And then finally she says, yes, you're right. I should do it. I said, yeah, you should. Forget about what your family thinks. Your daughter comes first. So she did it and got her daughter back. Same scenario here. Forget about what your family and if they're a crook and there's somebody in there who's bad. If they get arrested because of this, let them go. You have your daughter. That's number one. You should hold them in high priority. And yeah, people don't. People are funny. I just don't get it.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it, right? They're funny.
Yeah, they're funny.
Yeah, that's an odd situation, to say the least, but incredible the way it turned out. At least she got out of there.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, let's tie this up with the Delphi murders. And, of course, whatever you can say. I'm not going to prod past that because I know this is an ongoing case.
Yeah. I was asked in the beginning to jump on this case, and I said no. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people don't realize who haven't read the book. Inside the book, there's a lot of documentation never seen by public, like emails, text messages, police reports that I'll dictate on the case. I know it's one of a kind type of read and write because there's no one who's done this like this. I've kept everything from day one on the Delphi murders all the way to now. And when I said no, I feel there's someone going to come forward to me, and that will happen. And I had the opportunity to speak with Libby's mom and some other person who's tied to the sheriff's office in Indiana. And we were going through the scenario, helping her. And I just, it wasn't my time. It wasn't my time. I just knew it wasn't. Sure enough, the only witness to this whole case is on my social media, feared for her life for a complete year and a bit, knowing who it is. I have all the photographs. I have everything on the individual who's a spitting image that you see on TV in all the sketches. I know his name. I know where he lives. Everything. I know what he's done in the past. And there's a lot more to this case. A lot more. She came forward. She came to me. And she was sitting there for a whole year. And it's just amazing. It's just, she's on my social media for a whole year, finally comes to me. And then we've been going back and forth with all kinds of letters and everything back and forth. That in itself, if I ever wrote a book, that'd be a huge book just based on everything there. Mm-hmm. So when I got hold of Jerry, spoke to him, he was kind of, in the beginning, dumbfounded at the fact of all the information, not seeing this before, and what have you. And this guy's living, like you say, normal life, right plain sight of everybody. And it's amazing. I know they got to tie a lot of things together. They have to do a lot of stuff. But you heard him in that video on Ashley Bansfield's Crime on Crime show. He says, I like to thank all law enforcement. And I know he's going to say, and the one guy in Canada, but he said, and in Canada. Mm-hmm. I hope soon, I know they got a lot of work to do. They got a lot of stuff to put together and do this. And I hope it's soon. I know they're watching them 24/7, complete surveillance. So, I mean, people don't fear for your life because they're watching 24/7. But they got to tie, and I can't get into much more than say they got to tie together a lot of things. And that's where I got to leave it.
No, thanks for sharing what you can about that. I'll definitely be on the lookout for any new information on that case. So, Robbie, what about just everyday things that don't have to do with true crime and solving murders? Do you pick up on things like that throughout the day?
Try not to. I mean, that's the key word. Try not to.
Yeah.
I occupy myself. I mean, I work out in the gym every day, vigorously. I got my gardens. I got my fur babies. I tie myself into them. I got my children, my wife. I try not to, because if I get overoccupied in just little menial things, I try to stay away from it. I get people, can you read me? I stay away from it.
Yeah.
Because I have so much more that I've done. And, I got my life is tied up as it is. Here's something for you I'll share in your show too. Emmy award-winning film director Peter Carlos gets me. I'm on a show. He hears me, and he couldn't believe the book like you did. You read it, and right now he is repitching to networks. And my partner on the show is Chief of Police Martha Decker from Texas, and I have a dog team. That's a specialist dog team, and I'm working with her right now, Laura Ronbaum, and her dogs on a case and assisting. We've got so far in this, it's amazing, this other case. You'll have to have me back when this one's done, because it'll blow your mind too. It's a big high-profile case out of Wichita.
There's so many cases in the book, and I really had to restrain myself from being like, I'm going to talk about this. So I picked 3, but and I appreciate you touching on those extra cases. But I mean, how many cases are you usually working on at one time?
I wrote them down before the show. Right now, I'm on Delphi, LAPD, Kentucky, and Wichita. That's 4 right now. The other ones have to wait. It stems between 4 couple, because if I get too tied down and too out there, I'm drained all day long, and I've got dog team people calling me, speaking to me for half an hour, showing me photographs of where to go. Here's an example in Wichita. I get called in. They show me a little picture of the little boy. I start mentioning things. And in this case, I can tell you a little bit real quick. I said, all right, paw and a knee. And I said, like paw below the knee, something just below the knee, paw, knee. And then I say, there's an Air Force base, not airport, Air Force base. And I said, everybody, the key players are all within a 5-minute radius of all of this. Sure enough, all the key players are within a 5-minute radius. The one person I'm supposed to speak to, that I want to speak to, lives on Pawnee Road.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, when it's done like that, and they're going back and forth and sending pictures, I'm dealing an hour or 2 there, and then somebody else calls up and says, did you listen to the interrogation videos? They're like an hour each, and I got 9 of them. So then I got, other, so it's a lot of work.
Well, it's all really, for the most part, very dark stuff. So I'm sure you can't be just completely inundated with that stuff all day, every day. You got to take those breaks.
Oh, you do. I love ice cream.
Yeah, exactly. Let's hear the music from the truck. We need that right now. Nice, light, and happy. A little creepy, but still light and happy. So when is Volume 2 going to come out, Robbie?
Well, the cases we just talked about, I want those in the book. I'm tying these up and finishing these off. Then there's so many more. Like I said, there's Volume 2, probably 3 and 4. But in light of what you just asked, going back to the director, he said, most likely what's going to happen is the network who picks us up, which he really truly feels, he's really tied to one network. It's a big one in the United States. He's really tied to them. He says they're going to buy the rights. Most likely we'll buy the rights to my book. So I really have to play it by ear, wait, because if I just throw it out there, then there's Volume 2 and they buy the rights, right? No, I'm not stupid. I want to get some money.
Well, and I think that would be an incredible show. It ties to some of my favorite things, which is true crime, and then, your abilities, your extrasensory abilities to tie all this stuff together and see what other people can't see. I would love to see a show like that.
Absolutely, I would too. To see something where, I did a tour in 2010, and it was called the Psychic Justice Tour. I started at my hometown, like I explained in the beginning. I ended up in Kentucky, Iowa, Ohio, Indiana. Where else did I go? In Toronto. I did all these missing persons and homicide cases live on stage in front of an audience. So they got to see me within an hour and a half of one case, break everything down, and then the police looking at each other going, wow. And they're writing stuff down because, that's the lead they needed, or, I find the guy alive, or I solve another one in Ohio with the U.S. Marshals. And, it was amazing. So they'll be able to see that. And hopefully it happens where you're watching TV, I break it down in that segment, you get the drift of it, and if it's not finished, then you get a recap in the following show. Or at the end of the season, we recap all the shows and show you who got arrested and who got found.
Well, Robbie, let everybody know where they can find you, your books, the movies, the shows you've been on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very simple, robbiethomas.net. You can go there. There's a lot of information. I hope people enjoy it. And, that's where you can contact me.
Well, I will be entitling this show Psychic Profiler Volume 1 because I definitely want you back on when Volume 2 comes out.
Oh, I'd love to come back for you.
Thanks, Robbie.
No, thank you.
Well, I'm so-and-so. I was given this name by my parents. I've been to such and such a college. I've done these things in my profession. I produce a little biography. Buddha says, forget it. That's not true. That's some story. That's all gone. That's all past. I want to see the real you are now. Well, nobody knows who that is. Because we don't know ourselves except through listening to our echoes and consulting our memories. But then there's a real you, and that again leads us back to this question. Who are you? That is the real you. We shall see how they play with this exam by the koans to get you to come out of your shell and find out who you really are. where he says, when you settle down in the train to read your newspaper and so on, you are not the same person who a little while ago left the platform. If you think you are linking your moments up in a chain. And this is what binds you to the wheel of birth and death. But when you know that every moment in which you are is the only moment, this comes into Zen. A master will say to somebody, get up and walk across the room. And he comes back and he says, where are your footprints? They've gone. So where are you? Who are you? When we are asked who we are, we usually give a kind of recitation of a history.